Welcome to Seahawks Forever, everybody. I am Dan, and we are kicking off the annual opponent preview series today by looking at what I think is the best team in the division and should be the hands-down favorite to win the NFC West as we sit here today with July starting tomorrow, which means we are almost in training camp month. And so it's time to look ahead. Jake Ellenbogen, who does such a terrific job creating content for the Rams and covering that team. He's been on the show before. You know him, you love him, you might not like him because he's from the other side of the fence, but stick around till the end when I ask him to assess the entire division and give us an idea of how many games he thinks each of the four teams are going to win, because he has been remarkably accurate in the past about making those predictions. And as much as he's high on his own team, he gives credit where it's due, and he has some things to say about the Seahawks that I think you're going to enjoy. So, Jake Ellenbogen joins me next for a Rams training camp preview as we get closer to starting the NFL season. This is Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Hey, do me a favor if you would. I spent a little time kind of tweaking some things and adding some new products today. Head over to the Seahawks Forever merch store. That link is listed down below in the description, and pick something up for yourself. And when you do, let me know when you get it and let me know how much you like it. Kudos again to John McGrath. Got his address today. I'll be sending out that free Seahawks Forever logoed polo shirt to him. All the other ways you can support the show are all listed down below as well. You can buy me a coffee. You can donate directly. You can head on over to Patreon and check out the membership tiers there. As we get closer to the season, there will be exclusive content there once training camp starts from my experience there and being able to walk the sidelines at least early in camp. So you'll want to check that out. There are a couple things up there that you cannot get on YouTube, including some breakdowns with some All-22 tape with Sam Darnold in Minnesota last year. So check that out. The other thing is I've finally knocked the rust off, started writing again. So I do have a Substack. It will be free until training camp starts. And even then, I will keep it very, very reasonable. But just really wanted to get into writing again. Started off with my first post, a little bit of my origin story and kind of my broadcast background and some of the chain of events that led Seahawks Forever to being born and led us to where we sit here today. So check that out as well if you would. But the best way you can support the channel is just subscribe to it, hit that thumbs up button, and if you want to be notified of new material, hit that bell button as well. Lots to talk about with Jake, including some, well, it's not breaking news at this point in the day, but some news that broke earlier today that did have a little bit of a Rams flavor to it. So we'll start with that. Here's my conversation with Jake Ellenbogen. Jake, it's good to see you. It's been a minute. Thanks for hopping back on the show.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, Dan. Good to see you too. And yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to rush the summer. I am enjoying the summer, but I miss football, and I'm not just talking about the spring league. I mean like actual like NFL football. That's what I miss right now.
This is kind of when it gets fun because I know here in Seattle, they moved up their mandatory minicamp. It was they ended up having it a week earlier than they originally intended. And then they even lopped off the third of the 3 days that were scheduled. And so all of a sudden, like, the 10th of June, the 23rd of July seems like it's a year away. And it's in the summertime, stuff going on, whatever, more active. And it's kind of cool how quickly time goes by. And now tomorrow's the 1st of July, and then it feels like it's tomorrow. So here we go.
Yeah, it's true. The good news is, I mean, in the past, it would just feel like the dead period would just be dead, right? And time would just be going very slow. And while I would enjoy the summer, whatever, but since I got into covering the Yankees last year, it makes June and July kind of fly by because I do a show after every game. Yeah. So you start to realize you're like, oh, okay. So we're at the end of June already. I'm like, all right, like it just works out, So yeah. I was always told, if you stay busy, it goes by quicker. I definitely see what people meant by that.
Thanks for reminding me of that. Do me a favor when we're done here. I want to ask you an MVP related question to use on my Mariners channel. We'll get into that discussion. A little bit. Let's hit the most current news first, because something happened in the league today. Sort of an unusually big story for this time of year, but Jalen Ramsey going from the Dolphins to the Steelers and what turned out to be not really a big blockbuster trade. I think it was technically two different transactions, but Jonnu Smith also going from the Dolphins to the Steelers. And you've certainly made your feelings about Jalen Ramsey known for a long time, and I think you were certainly one of the voices. There was what appeared to me to be a consensus out there this offseason that Ramsey back to the Rams just made so much sense. It was inevitable, and it was ultimately going to happen. Your feelings then on the move today, and why isn't Jalen Ramsey a Ram?
Yeah, I think it kind of coincides with the fact that he's not a free agent, and the Dolphins, ultimately they were going to trade him wherever they wanted him to go. The Rams, when they traded him to Miami to begin with, they had no issue paying him. They had issue with the cap. A lot of teams, I always bring this up because that's the difference between a Rams organization, say the Raiders, when you trade away Khalil Mack at his prime, coming off his best year of his career. It's like, why do you do that? They actually didn't want to pay him. It had nothing to do with the cap. They just didn't want to give him the money. But when it came to, Ramsey, a lot of people in that building love Ramsey, and Ramsey loves the Rams. So I felt like that was definitely going to happen. But my biggest concern was Miami. Like, what are they looking for? And then I started hearing, it doesn't seem like they're really willing to work with the Rams as far as, certain amount of cap that they would be taking on. And really, it just sounded like, all right, if you want Ramsey, you're going to front the bill. And we heard about the Steelers the last 2 weeks and how it was unlikely, but they were checking in. And then he started following apparently all these Steelers on Instagram, and people started talking more about it. And my biggest thing is this. I don't think Ramsey was a need. I think Ramsey was a luxury. I'm actually very high on this Rams cornerback room, this Rams secondary in general. A lot of people are not. But I look at this same Rams cornerback room that, basically shut down two of the best wide receiver rooms in the league in the postseason when it mattered. I look at the way they played down the stretch, and I like to remind people these three guys, Ahkello Witherspoon, Kobe Durant, and Darius Williams, did not get a chance to play with each other until really halfway through the year. They were kind of dead set on Tre'Davious White, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
So you see, those three and just kind of developing the rapport, and you see the safety room, which is very big, plenty of talent there. And it's like Ramsey absolutely would have helped this team. And I was very excited about that proposition. But my biggest thing was Ramsey was always a luxury in my eyes. I would have loved to have him, but do I feel like the Rams are now no longer Super Bowl contenders because they didn't get Ramsey? Absolutely not. Yeah. Right? So that's how I looked at it. I understand there are a lot of Rams fans upset today. I was surprised that he basically brought in Minkah Fitzpatrick in return. I think that is a lot. I was thinking with the amount of money it would take with Ramsey, maybe a fifth, maybe a sixth, and the Steelers gave up a lot for him. So we'll see how it works out. I'm always rooting for him. He's a good dude. I've talked to him before, but I'm glad the Rams didn't, trade away a player like that. So if you're trading away Minkah Fitzpatrick, I'd have to imagine that the Miami would have probably wanted a Cam Kinchins or Quentin Lake or Cam Curl, somebody in the safety room. And I just don't think that makes you a better team because you're trading a younger guy, and you now are creating a hole in the secondary. I didn't necessarily agree with that. So those were my thoughts on that, Dan.
Yeah. And I haven't seen any reporting relative to this yet today. If it is out there, I haven't seen it yet, but you have to wonder the way things ended up working out, an hour later, and they also acquired Jonnu Smith, that those conversations that the two are linked together, and that the ability to get somebody like Minkah and also find a team to take Jonnu Smith off your hands because they didn't want to give him an extension probably played a big role in that. For sure. Yeah. No,
that's true. It does feel like a lot with Minkah, though. It does.
It does. Yeah. What a playmaker. What an impact he made on that defense when he came over. And I remember that year. Gosh, now, the memory isn't what it used to be, but I remember being really disappointed the Seahawks weren't in on that. I think that might have been the year that they acquired Oh, shoot. I'm completely blank. I think they acquired a safety that offseason. I think they Diggs, I think maybe it was the same year. I don't know, but there was something that happened there that I thought, God, that would have been nice. That would have been really nice. He just seemed like he had Pete Carroll written all over him. The Rams must agree with you that they feel good about their cornerback room because they didn't draft one. And I'm looking at the draft class right now. And I know it's been a couple months, but it's our first time in talking about this. And in the interest of giving Seahawk fans that watch the channel like the most knowledge possible about what this roster looks like, your thoughts on the draft class overall, which was completely transformed by their opportunity to get a 2026 first round pick, which I didn't think was going to happen. I didn't think, and we actually had 2 instances in this year's draft of teams picking up 2026 firsts. I just thought with how people generally regarded the talent in this particular class, deep, but not good at the top, versus what's expected to be available next year, I didn't think anyone was going to be willing to part with 2026 first round picks, but only takes one, and desperation is a very powerful motivator. So just your thoughts on that, their ability to come out of this with a future first, and then also on the class as a whole.
I still can't believe they did that. I don't know what the Falcons were thinking. But I mean, the Falcons did pick Penix 8th overall. That was ballsy, right? So they are a team. They like a guy, they fall in love with the guy, and they just do it. Like, they don't care. And it's not that James Pierce Jr. isn't going to be good, but is he going to be worth that? I can actually recall a similar trade.
Man, and all the character questions, like, yeah, that was a shocker.
That too. Do you remember the Saints traded 2 first rounders? They traded 2 first rounders to the Packers, and they got, well, it was technically, they gave away a first rounder the following year. They trade away to move up, right?
Right.
And they did it with the Packers, and they acquired the rights to draft. What's his name? The guy, I just totally blanked on his name. The UTSA edge defender. I think he's on the Lions now. Oh my God.
Oh, I see. Now we're both blanking.
Marcus, I can't even remember, but yeah. So it was Marcus something. I'm gonna remember it probably halfway through the show. So they traded they traded a first rounder the following year for him, and he had injury issues, and it just never.
Marcus Davenport, is that who you're talking about?
Marcus Davenport, thank you. Okay. And it just never worked out, and that's a first rounder that you just gave up. And it was like mid first rounder, you were trading up like with the pack. That was a lot to give up. And so you kind of look at that and you're like, I don't really know what the Falcons are doing, but maybe it'll work out. I don't know. And it sure makes hate watching the Falcons. That's going to be interesting this year, because I have nothing against them, but I want the number 1 overall pick if possible. But no, I think looking at that trade, looking at the Browns, I think it's safe to say the Rams are going to be very happy that they just waited until the second round and just gave up their first round pick to get, a first round pick next year.
Yeah, because until that happened, were you expecting them to take a quarterback at some point in this draft?
Yeah. So the guy that you guys ended up getting, that was my guy. So right. I thought Milroe could actually be in play there at 26, trading down. He ends up falling in the 3rd round. I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. And I think it's more so the intangibles that get me excited. Like, I feel like those guys are more likely to thrive. We've seen the arm talent. We've seen all of that with other guys, right? But when people compare him to Anthony Richardson, I just think he understands the game so much more than Anthony Richardson does. So I actually am higher on Jalen Milroe than most. But with the Rams, yeah, I absolutely thought that they were either going to draft a Milroe. If you told me before the draft Shedeur Sanders was going to fall to the 5th round, I would have said you were crazy, and there's no way the Rams let him fall that far. And then McCord, I had gotten some info that McVay loved McCord. I don't know if I don't know if that's still the case, because what I want to also point out is this getting that first round pick in 2026, it kind of changes things, right? Like, even if you love a quarterback, I mean, you still have to really love one to draft one. It doesn't matter where you draft them. And I think with the Rams, they were looking more quality over quantity with their draft this year because they've drafted 24 players in the last 2 drafts. So I kept telling people, like, they're probably not going to pick that many guys. Like, all these trade downs and everything I saw in mock drafts for Rams fans, I'm like, they're probably not going to do that. And sure enough, they end up going with 6 guys. And it was quality because they get a Terrence Ferguson who they think can be a franchise tight end, right? They go out and they get Josiah Stewart, who they think can take over, in all likelihood, probably can take over for Byron Young if they don't re-sign him. Very, very highly productive in college. And they didn't just stop there. You know, they went after Ty Hamilton. They gave away a 4th rounder next year to go up and get him. They got an explosive running back in, Jarquez Hunter, who I really like. So, they were doing some different things for sure. And then, of course, they ended up having, they got Chris Paul Jr., who I had a 1st-round grade on. And then they did a nice job in UDFA, stealing Sean Dolak, who should have probably been drafted on either late day 2 or early day 3. I think he's a hell of a talent out of Buffalo. So I thought they did a really nice job, all things considered. I definitely think out of all the teams, Seattle got the highest grade for me in the NFC West. Because I really liked what they were able to do going out and getting ZELLE. I liked, their pickup of Horton. And of course, Milroe. I love Milroe. So I really came away liking what they did. And I think the Rams deserve credit getting the 1st-round pick, but I still would lean towards Seattle. But ultimately, the Rams had a really good draft. And I would be very surprised if we don't see some big time things out of Terrence Ferguson as soon as possible, because sounds to me like they would have drafted this guy 26th from the sound of it. They really, really liked him. They saw him as a young Travis Kelce, Chris Cooley type, and they feel like he can really help their offense. So I'm excited about what they did.
It's always interesting to me, last couple of years anyway, when I look at how the Seahawks and the Rams operate, because there's some crossover there. There's some common ground in what they look for in football players. Like, you can see it in their top 30 visit lists. There's a lot of redundancy there, carryover, and even just in the players that they do acquire. Like, I know Jarquez Hunter was a top 30 visit to the Seahawks. I think he was the only running back that was among that group. They really liked him. So I was a little bummed to see him end up with the Rams. But even just looking at the roster overall, right? Like, there's ex-Seahawks all over the roster. There's guys that, we know that in his draft year, the Seahawks were high on Byron Young, and he was in for a 30 visit, and he was mocked a bunch. There's Poona Ford is now on the roster. Obviously, Colby Parkinson is on the roster. And then there's guys like
they were interested.
Cam Kinchins was a top 30 visit, and it's just on and on and on. Akella Witherspoon, obviously former Seahawk. There's clearly some similarities in what they look for in prospects. The Josiah Stewart pick fascinates me. Obviously, the production is hard to ignore at Michigan. Mm-hmm. He's an undersized guy. I kind of had a hard time getting on board with him after what I saw in Mobile. He just didn't do anything during the week at all, really, that I thought stood out. He just seemed to get swallowed up in one-on-ones, but also looks like the kind of guy that, depending on how you utilize him and scheme and whatnot, like, the twitchiness is there, the burst is there. But you know me and you know my background, right? I'm like, my first thought when they took Josiah Stewart, my first thought was, that seems a little high. My second thought was, he's not going to beat out Brennan Jackson. Like, is Brennan Jackson still in the plans? Is he a guy they like?
I think he is. Definitely like Brennan Jackson. I mean, obviously he's been on my show before. I would even call him a friend of the show. Nice. So yeah, I'm rooting for him as well. I think Josiah Stewart gives them kind of that relentless motor. And he's what I would say, he's not a practice player. He's the guy that's going to show up on Sundays and he's going to be able to set the edge. And you're going to be like, how is he doing this at that size? Because he did it against like Power 5, like really, or I guess now it's Power 4, but really talented Power 4.
Still guys. Power 5.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to be sure. Like,
have you seen the letterhead? Like, the NCAA still considers them Power 5. So let's not move off of that too quick.
Okay. I'm with you on that. But Yeah, I got corrected the other. Oh no, it's power forward. I was like, all right, whatever.
Until it's
whatever
not.
makes people happy. I don't care.
Right.
But no, I think playing at Michigan, playing against the teams he went up against, 30 plus sacks in his career, production isn't everything for me in college, but it is a lot of things. And I think, you know, since I really got into this whole draft community, I've really noticed how many people are just so quick to just shun production. It's all about who looks like the prospect. And I get that more in college basketball because you're talking about guys that just this 6'6" center he's not gonna have a spot in the NBA. So it doesn't matter how well he did in college. That's not gonna translate. It's different in baseball because you could have a guy I was just saying this on my show the other day. You can have a guy in AAA, Alan Winans for the Yankees. He's striking out guys left and right with his 90-mile-an-hour fastball because he's just locating well. Well, the problem is now in 2025, guys are used to hitting 100-mile-an-hour fastball. So you're going to get blitzed. So in the NFL, I find that production does matter. I'm not saying it's the everything, but if you could tell me I could choose right now and the Rams just replace their pick in the 3rd round with Shamar Stewart, I would decline every time, 100 out of 100 times. I don't like Shamar Stewart at all. I don't like the whole thing that's going on right now, like how he doesn't want to play for the team. Right. But it's not even that. I wasn't a fan of his tape. He wasn't productive. He had like 4.5 sacks in his career. And I think the 30 sacks at a program like Michigan, transferring from Coastal Carolina, I would say that he's been through more adversity, Josiah Stewart. And so I would trust that player on Sundays more than I trust Shamar. So that's kind of how I look at Josiah. I think he's somebody that as soon as Sundays hit, he is going to make plays when he's given opportunities. But is he a guy that's going to stand out in those one-on-ones in Mobile, Alabama? Absolutely not. So I was not shocked when you said that because I'm like, he didn't test well, right? And really, you can see that at times where he can get kind of, completely pushed off the play. But I think he thrives when there's chaos around him. He's really good at using that leverage. And so that's what I saw on tape is so I think he's going to end up having a really nice role with this team. And I think Chris Shula is going to use him as a chess piece.
What's going on with the running back situation there on the roster? There seems to be some disagreement about whether Kyron Williams should be paid and sign long-term and whether they're willing to do that. And then also there was this assumption, I think last year, I think I put myself in this bucket, that the Blake Corum pick last year was an inspired choice, that it was going to be just this really dynamic two-headed monster. And he never seemed to find any traction last year. Some people are even implying that he might be a bust and just a guy that wasn't what they thought he was when they drafted him. And then you go out and you spend a 4th on Jarquez Hunter. Where do things stand with that room?
Is it funny how a 4th, because it was this year, like people are moving him ahead of Blake Corum, who was a 3rd last year because it's this year? I always thought that was funny. So the way I see it is this: Kyron is definitely your starter unless something goes really south in those negotiations, because I know they still really want to bring him back. The question is, are they going to lowball him? Is he going to want out? Like, I don't see Kyron as a player that's going to force his way out of town. I don't see that. So regardless, if they get a deal done or not, he's going to be, in my estimation, he is going to be a part of this team and a big part of the offense in 2025. If he doesn't get a deal done, then I don't know what goes on beyond 2025. But I think he's here for this season for sure. Then you have Blake Corum, like you mentioned. And I thought Corum had his moments last year. He had a few huge runs or pretty big runs that were called back due to holds. I was, of course, at one of the games and there was no hold. But that's football. I think you see some of the same things that you saw with Kyron, and really that was their mission, is they want to go out. They saw Kyron Williams in 2023. Okay. And the big thing with Kyron Williams in 2023 is that he couldn't stay healthy, right? And when he was off the field, the Rams saw their offense and said, there is not a soul on this roster that can do what Kyren Williams does. We can't allow him to be on the field 95% of snaps. It's going to kill him. He can't stay healthy. Let's go out and get a clone in Blake Corum. Well, here's the issue, okay? He stayed healthy the whole year. So they're like, well, okay. And Blake Corum now is just kind of a copy of Kyren. He's just not as good because he's not quite there yet. Kyren is now going into his, final year of his contract. So you saw some good things out of Corum. You didn't see great things at the goal line, which was a little surprising because he scored a lot of touchdowns in college. So Kyren multiple times had to take over where they were like, all right, we're going to give Blake Corum the lead. And, he has the whole drive. He's carrying the ball. They get into the red area and he just can't punch it in. Kyren comes right in, punches it in. Now you bring in Jarquez Hunter. Why do you do that? Because there's no explosion. Okay. Blake Corum has some burst. He does. And he has some thicker thighs, legs, whatever. It's hard to bring down. He's got a good body for the running back position, right? I would say he's got a better body for the running back position than Kyren does. But he doesn't do the little things Kyren does well. And so it was hard for him to get on the field. But Kyren, as great as he is, he's struggled with fumbles and he struggled with those explosive runs. And the way the audience and the fans are starting to look at this now is, well, we kind of feel as though there's still meat left on that bone. And when you have an offensive line that executes their blocks correctly and the running back only gets a measly 10 to 15 yards on a play that really should have been 40, that starts to weigh on you, especially when the offense isn't necessarily a well-oiled machine like it was in 2021, like it was in 2018 and 2017, right? So that's the thing. And I think that's why people started to really turn on Kyren. Insert, Jarquez Hunter. And this is a player who played at Les Snead's alma mater at Auburn. Explosive player, ran the 4.4s. He's strong. He can just bully guys. He can run people over. He can bounce off guys left and right. And he's also a threat to return kicks and punts. So the Rams see this guy as somebody that's not currently in the running back room. And they kind of learn from their mistake. Is I don't think they regret picking Corum, but picking a guy just because he's very similar to your starter because you want to have that same thing on the field, they did find that's not a foolproof method. And so adding a guy like Jarquez Hunter creates some diversity in that running back room. And I don't necessarily think Jarquez Hunter is going to be like, a top-notch running back this year. But down the road, he could emerge into that. He's got a long way to go as a pass protector, though. And that's the big thing. If you can't pass protect, if you can't block as a wide receiver, you're not getting on the field for Sean McVay. Yeah. So that's the big hurdle for him. I think we see all three of them this year. The way I look at Jarquez Hunter is he is the third string running back. He is behind Blake Corum this year. And when you have the bases loaded and you need a home run because you're down 3 and you just want to take the lead and win the game on a grand slam, that's what you put in Jarquez Hunter. You're going for our offensive line is protecting well. We feel like we give him like 6 runs and he's going to break one of them. And if he breaks one of them, we can really just win this game. That is when they're going to use Jarquez Hunter, in my opinion. So we'll see how it goes, but that's what I would expect. And then the passing game, I'd probably lean towards Corum. I think that will be his role.
It's obviously the big move for the Rams outside of, locking up Matthew Stafford for the next couple of years and kind of settling all of that confusion. It was bringing in Devontae Adams, and I don't know how much needs to be said about him. He's obviously going to be a huge weapon, and the combination of Nakua and Adams is certainly one that's going to cause a lot of headaches for guys like Mike McDonald as they try to prepare to face him. But I want to ask you this, because we can't talk about, a Rams preview on a Seahawks channel without talking about Cooper Kupp. And it's fascinating to me. I've seen this in a couple of different areas. I've also made this point in regards to how Perception seems to have shifted suddenly and magically in how people view Geno Smith now that he's been traded to the Raiders, and also how they view Sam Darnold versus how he was viewed last year in Minnesota. But Cooper Kupp it's funny to me because, granted, he's 32 years old now. I get it. Or he's about to turn 32, whichever. He's people talk about him like he needs a walker to get around. Like he's this broken down, it's funny to me. And yet OTAs, wasn't impacted by anything negatively in his offseason workouts or OTAs or minicamp or anything. He's 100% healthy, 100% contributing. You see the pictures in the video. I know everyone's in the best shape of their life in mini camps and OTAs, but he truly looks like it. I feel like if he had stayed in LA, the storyline out of OTAs would be, man, look at Cooper Kupp looks young again. He looks reborn, but yet he switches teams and he's a cast off and he's just kind of a spare part. It just relate to people because, again, this is the first time we've had a chance to catch up since all this went down. It was obviously a very impactful March for the Seahawks, or end of February and March. Your thoughts on Cooper Kupp just not being a Ram anymore and how weird that's going to be to see him in a Seahawk helmet?
It's weird, but I mean, I saw Isaac Bruce in a 49er helmet, and I saw Steven Jackson wearing the Patriots, the Don and the Patriots logo in the Super Bowl, and Chris Long, and you just kind of get used to it, I guess, as sad as it is. I mean, Jared Goff being traded away, you're told that he's a franchise quarterback, and then he's traded away for Stafford, which I loved, by the way. But the point being is that there's a lot of turnover. Like when it comes to the Rams, I mean, you can't assume anybody's going to be a long-term stay. I mean, Ernest Jones, I was told, is like, oh, yeah, he's getting this contract. It's going to happen. And all of a sudden they're like, yeah, Ernest Jones isn't out there. Ernest Jones is now, being let go. Oh, wait, they actually traded him. Like, so I guess with all the turnover that I've seen, because I mean, like Marcus Peters getting, Jalen Ramsey, and then not long after trading away Jalen Ramsey and cutting Bobby Wagner after he signed a 5-year deal. I guess I'm just kind of used to it, but it needed to happen. I really think so.
Let me ask you this way then. Mm-hmm. How much based on what you saw last year after he was healthy? And again, I want to remind people it was an ankle. They talk about him like he had a spinal surgery or something, but how much do you think he has left in the tank?
I mean, I still think he can go over 1,000 yards. He could have done it last year. He's still going to have your games where he goes over 100 and he can catch 12 balls, and he'll have some games where he kind of disappears. And I think partially that could be him. I think partially that could be Stafford down the stretch was playing injured. I think partially it could be Sean McVay, because I think Sean McVay gets in his own head, and sometimes he tries to like over pursue and force it to Cooper and get him involved. And, so I think there are a lot of different circumstances there. The big thing I would say is this: I'm not flip-flopping on Cooper Kupp. I always believe, and I will continue to believe, that somebody with that work ethic, somebody that cares that much about fitness, cares that much about the nuanced details of the game, he's not just going to work out, he's going to be great for young receivers. You're going to watch JSN pick up things that he's never picked up before. He is like having another quarterback in your wide receiver room. He is a genius. Okay. He is an extension of the coaching staff, Sean McVay would say. But it's not even like a repetitive thing. It's not like, oh, yeah, I sound like a broken record because he says it all the time. No. Cooper Kupp is a football player in every meaning of the word. And the thing about him is that he sees football as a science, and he's learned it. And he's not just one of those guys that, okay, I'm the veteran, I don't owe you anything. He passed on everything that he learned to Puka. I believe if Puka Nacua wasn't around him, I don't think he'd be as good as he is today. And I think it's really going to be beneficial for Tutu Atwell. We're going to see him this year, and he's kind of taken over the Kupp role this year. We're going to see Jordan Whittington. I think, obviously, I do believe the Rams have the best wide receiver coach in the league in Eric Yarber, but I think Cooper Kupp might be the second best wide receiver coach in the league because he's that good at just knowing everything. And he's like the first one in, last one out type of guy. And he's going in every early morning and watching tape with Stafford. They called it the Breakfast Club. And then he brings in Puka, and Puka's doing it. So he's a guy that you bring in if you're really trying to take the next step in your culture. So the whole point of Cooper Kupp is that his essence won't leave the building when he does. Like, his essence is still going to be in that Rams building long after he's gone. He's already modeled the way, as the Rams would put it. So here's why I believe it was the right move to move on from Cooper Kupp, because I was not against bringing him back, but the reality is this. He's not winning on the horizontally breaking routes like he used to.
Right.
With that said, that's a huge part of his game. That's kind of what separates him from others, is that he's like a running back when he gets the ball in the second level. Then you can't really bring him down. He's really good at making guys miss. He's strong, can break tackles. I mean, he's a 6'2", 200-pound receiver who has just infinite amounts of attention to detail. And he's incredibly, he's not only just smart, like, before he gets on the field, he's smart on the field, like while he has the ball in his hand. So you have a guy like that and moving on from him, that's tough. What a lot of people don't understand is Cooper Kupp was essentially the deep threat for the Rams last year. You go back, you watch that Patriot game, and he's catching 2 bombs down the field. I don't think his speed is gone. I just think it's more so that stop and start ability, which is causing him to struggle to separate. And I think, unfortunately, and I made this video before he was gone. He was still a Ram. I was calling for him to be benched. I was actually calling for him to be benched at the end of the season because I felt like we had reached a point where Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington would be better off being on the field, not just for their development, but I think you're getting more potential for something to be good than having Cooper Kupp on the field. Now, was I saying Cooper Kupp shouldn't play at all? No, but I was saying we should see more of Whittington. We should see more of Atwell. A lot of fan base did not take too kindly to that. But you still see the incredible catch he makes against the Vikings. It's his only catch, but, he's just kind of like falling back, all hands, not a body catcher by any stretch. And then he goes up and high points the football against the Eagles in the snow. Yeah. He made some huge catches in that game. Yeah. And it just is a reminder that he still has that going to Seattle. So I'm never going to be one of those people that's like, oh, he's on Seattle now, he's damaged goods. I've always maintained that I felt like he was going downhill as far as he's not separating nearly as well as he used to. But here's the thing with Cooper Kupp that I didn't mention. He is one, if not the best blocking wide receiver in football. Mm-hmm. And that rubs off on everyone because when you see number 10 blocking and just taking on a linebacker or whoever, and he's driving him into the dirt, well, guess what? That young wide receiver is going to see that and be like, all right, if he's doing that, I need to be doing that. I'm a lot younger than him, right? So that's the thing. It's sad, it is, but I've just gotten so used to it. The Todd Gurley thing really kind of opened up the door for me at that point. When the Rams moved on from Gurley, who I thought was the best offensive player in football 2 years in a row, and then has an arthritic knee issue, and then he's gone. I'm just kind of used to it. Robert Woods was also very sad too, but I'm rooting for Cooper Kupp. And I'm doing it the same way Matthew Stafford is. Want him to do well when he plays against us. Want him to do poorly, right. But no, I'm even different than that. I'll root for him against the Rams. If I can get a win, I don't care what he does. But he's a really good guy, just a good human to have in that locker room. And I just think it's so smart to get a guy like that in there because I think JSN has the potential to be a superstar. I think he's a budding star, if not already a star. But we're talking about, Malik Neighbors and what he's going to do. We're talking about Malik Neighbors. We're talking about Jamar Chase. We're talking about Puka Nacua. We're talking about what Devontae Adams ended up being. That's the type of guy I think he can be. And I think having Kupp around him is really going to be beneficial. So Yeah, I would be excited to have Cooper Kupp. I would. If I'm Seattle right now, take what you can get. If he doesn't have 1,000 yards, it's not the end of the world, because you always have to remind yourself he's going to help you in different ways than just what the stats show.
It's cool to hear you talk about how smart he is, because he gave an interview after practice a couple weeks ago, right at the end of minicamp. And more so than any receiver I could ever remember talking about the game, he sounded like a quarterback to me. Like he was getting really detailed about how defenses attack that scheme and everything else. And it was really, I felt like I learned something just from a 3-minute soundbite. Yeah, that'll be fun to see. Let's talk about this defense, because it pains me to say this, but I also, just as a football fan and someone who appreciates football, just that defense was so much fun to watch. And I think one of the most remarkable storylines in the league the last 2 years is where that defense has progressed to after losing so many players 2 years ago. But, most notably, obviously, Aaron Donald, one of the greatest defensive linemen ever play in the NFL. That how quickly they were able to rebuild that thing with youth and just youth with their hair on fire, and how much of a problem they were by the end of the year. And I want to phrase this question this way. Ever since we acquired Sam Darnold, there has been, again, another offseason shift in narrative, I think, because during the regular season last year, he was one of the darlings. He was one of the storylines in the NFL. He got MVP votes, and he was the new Geno Smith, and he had resurrected his career. And look what we have here. And then because they lose in week 17, and then they get beat up badly by the Rams in their playoff game, suddenly the shine is off, and it's buyer beware. And I don't know what we're going to get, right? It feels different. If he had signed that 1-year deal that the Vikings wanted him to sign and went back again as insurance for JJ McCarthy, I think the narrative would be different. So I ask it to you in this way. That playoff game, right, was a disaster. But how much of that was, in your opinion, watching from the other side, watching what that defense did to that Kevin O'Connell Vikings offense, how much of that do you think was Sam Darnold, and how much of it was just total dominance? Because to me, when I watched the tape, it was complete and total systematic breakdown. They were outcoached. They were outplayed in every phase of the game. And there's a reason the Vikings then turned around weeks later and washed out their entire interior offensive line and traded it out for 3 new guys, because it wasn't good enough. But I feel like, as often is the case, that Darnold is taking the brunt of the blame there, because earlier in the season, week 7, he played well. He played well against that same defense, obviously one that was only 7 weeks into it, and with a bunch of young guys, whatever. He's 18 out of 25, 72% completions, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Like, he played really well. Rams won that game, but Sam Darnold played well. How much do you think that playoff game was on him, and how much of it was just domination by that defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of domination. What's not talked about is the secondary was dominant. I mean, that's why, you have the Viking. I was just saying this on, earlier on my show. You have the Vikings announcer screaming, just throw the ball.
Yeah, that one play.
Get rid of the ball. And it's like
9 sacks.
If you don't go back and watch all 22, you're doing yourself a disservice, because he couldn't throw the ball. Akella was draped all over Justin Jefferson, or if it wasn't him, it was Kobe Durant all over Jordan Addison. There wasn't anybody to throw the ball to. And I feel like this is kind of the misconception about the Rams defense, as great as that defensive front is and was last year. And it was very, very, very good. I don't think people give any credit to the secondary. And this is how it works. I think we've talked about this before in some facet, where there's a certain part of a group that gets a lot of credit and not a lot for the other. To me, this Rams secondary gets no credit. The way people talk about this Rams secondary, you'd think that they were the Lions secondary that was giving up the 30th ranked pass defense. You know what I mean? They're really down the stretch against A.J. Brown, against Jordan Addison, against Justin Jefferson, Devontae Smith, you name them. The Rams secondary shut all of these guys down. And all we talk about I understand it, but all we talk about is that defensive front. We don't talk about the job that Ford did. We don't talk about the job that Darius Williams did. We don't talk about the job that Kobe did. And we don't talk about the safeties. And I think all of that group, they were so integral into what the defense ended up becoming. We saw, and this is, I think, really why this is the case. We saw this defense emerge up front against the Lions on Sunday Night Football Week 1. Remember that? It was Jared Verse. It was Braden Fisk. We already knew Kobe Turner was really good, snubbed of a Rookie of the Year. But, that we knew that they were good. What people then would go back to is, well, Jameson Williams catches an 80-yard touchdown, right? Or whatever it was. And then week 2 against Arizona, giving up 40+. And Marvin Harrison Jr., who didn't do anything the whole year, it felt like, but he only did everything against the Rams. That's what people talked about. But what they don't know is Tre'Davious White was starting for that second. It was a different secondary. Yeah. Cam Kinchins had no experience as a starter. He actually really grew, into his role over time. Jalen McCullough was this UDFA out of Tennessee. He grew into his role. They were using Quentin Lake as the star. Cam Curl was so much better in the second half of the year. And I think it goes to show you, we talk about the offensive line and how, these guys have to gel and, they all play, within the confines of the system and everything. We don't talk about how a whole secondary has to gel. There's so much communication going on. We do not talk about it nearly enough. So it's not a surprise to me when Ahkello Witherspoon was named a starter, when Darius Williams was fully healthy, all of a sudden we're starting to see the safeties playing their best ball. We're starting to see the pass rush that was good already and established themselves as, okay, this is a scary pass rush, became dominant, like one sack away from having the record in the postseason for most sacks in a postseason run. Dominant. That's what we were talking about. So I really do believe that it's not that because I'm iffy on Darnold. I am, truthfully. But I think the big thing here is that it's not just even the offensive line, which he does have an excuse because one of the best offensive linemen goes down, in that Rams game, out for the year, right? And now they go out and they get, Cam Robinson. Thank you. Yeah. And Cam Robinson gave up like 21 pressures his last 2 games. Yeah. So at some point or another, like, you still have to take everything as it was. Yes, the defensive front, they had stunts, they threw different looks at him, but when he had all that time, and that's why I can't stand that. I think it's funny, but I can't stand how Darnold gets the blame for holding on the ball all day, but he had no one else to throw to. And if he goes to try and take off and run like everybody wanted him to, they had somebody right there waiting for him. That's what people don't talk about. You put spies on running quarterbacks. The Rams just had the best game plan possible to stop Sam Darnold. And to be fair, they saw him earlier in the year and they weren't nearly as strong and as developed as they were at that point. So Sam Darnold's the same quarterback he was going back to week 7, but now Sam Darnold is going up against a defense that is just transformed. It's just way different than what he saw. So I think it's fair for sure for you to feel that way about Darnold. I still think he would have had the axe hanging over his head or whatever people want to call it with the Vikings. And the reason being is what I find is, I would say this: Dak Prescott is a good quarterback in this league. He is. But when people go back and they watch his postseason performances, even when he's played well or decent, right? They see the loss and that's all they think of. Mm-hmm. Dak, you can't even say is top 10 anymore because people will just say, well, he doesn't win the playoffs. And that's the thing, is that it's playoffs over everything for people. And for me, Darnold scares me because I just don't think he's a great decision maker. So, I mean, the best decision was probably to eat the football in those circumstances because he would have thrown 6 picks against the Rams in that playoff game. Right. But I don't trust him in those late game situations. I think Seattle didn't really have a choice because everyone talks about, Aaron Rodgers and Stafford, all these guys were available. I kind of think Geno Smith was a better option for what the Seahawks do. I know they go out and they get I can't remember anybody today. Clint Kubiak. Good
Yeah.
Lord. I almost said Clint Capella. Now I'm thinking about the Lakers right now. Clint Kubiak. And so he'll fit, I think, more of that than maybe Geno would, but I think Geno still would have been a fit. I personally, and it's weird because I was always hard on Geno. I think Geno emerged as the number 2 quarterback in this division last year. I thought I saw a level of leadership that I just don't think you're getting out of 80% of quarterbacks nowadays, that 85. I mean, when they go down that drive against the 49ers, when they go down and win that game, like who does that? There's only a few quarterbacks in the league that you would trust to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like he, in a sense, got more flack than Darnold did. And that's my one issue with Seattle is that I think Geno is, at this point in his career, I actually like Geno more than Sam Darnold, but I don't hate the move to pick up Darnold. I will say this, don't sleep on Jalen Milroe. He gets some time to sit behind Darnold and learn. And we talked about the intangibles. I really think he could be a problem down the road. And I think he's got the arm. He's the only one that, like, you're going through all the traits and everything. And typically you don't draft a quarterback in the first round if they don't have elite traits. I don't think there was anybody who had 2 elite traits out of the quarterbacks. He has 2. Elite athleticism, some of the best I've ever seen. And he has an elite arm. Like, that arm strength is special. And so, yeah, with Clint Kubiak and time to sit and really just soak everything in, I think he'll be your franchise quarterback. So
I was asked point blank the other day on another show who I think the starting quarterback is going to be in 2027. And even though I'm bullish on Darnold being a good fit in this scheme and being a good quarterback, my comp for Sam Darnold has been Matt Hasselbeck, who during his entire career here in Seattle had a good portion of the fan base always was looking to replace him because, you know, if you're not a top 5 quarterback, you stink, right? I mean, you probably even hear some of this in regards to Stafford in LA.
I did.
In some respects, right? I hate that mentality, but it is what it is. But I said Jalen Milroe. I think they have, and we don't see enough of this in the NFL, certainly not at the top of the draft. There's a luxury to be able to get a guy like this in the 3rd round, certainly. But there's a plan, right? Even the decision to bring Drew Lock back and sign him to a 2-year contract so that your quarterback room is pretty locked up. There will be, outside of disaster striking that room, there will be absolutely no immediate pressure from the fan base, the media, anyone else, if Darnold should struggle or get hurt, for him to play, because you have now that extra layer of protection. So I love the way they're going about it. You know, there's obviously no guarantee when it comes to that position that a guy's going to hit. But man, you know, and I've been thinking about these concepts a lot as I look forward to the Major League draft the Major League Baseball draft in 2.5 weeks, with the Mariners sitting there with the 3rd pick. Like, give me ceiling all day long. Give me upside all day long. If I'm going to bank on a guy, I would rather take a guy with a higher bust potential, as long as the boom potential is higher. And that's why I was excited about the pick, even though, like, going back to Mobile, man, I wasn't high on him then. In fact, I think I even said that week, word for word, I think at one point I said, he's a project. I mean, the traits are there, but he's a project. Let him be someone else's project. But sometimes you don't know how you feel about a player until your team's on the clock, until they take him. And really excited about the plan they have in place that they've kind of built around him. I think it gives him the best opportunity for him to succeed.
The way I would describe him is, like, from the Rams perspective, and I always like using this because this kind of just sets my plan in motion. It also is how I feel about Terrence Ferguson, because he was not my favorite tight end. My favorite tight end was Fannin. I loved Harold Fannin. I think Harold Fannin could be really good. I just hate that he went to the Browns, but that's neither here nor there. If this was the Sosar St. Louis Rams, I'm not taking Ferguson, and I'm definitely not taking Milroe, because I don't trust the coaching staff in that moment to develop him. I don't trust that he's going to be in a nurturing environment, a good situation. No. But with McVay sitting behind Stafford and Garoppolo, I was like, this is the best fit for him out there. And think about having Puka Nacua potentially for like his long-term
That would've been a great
connection
spot.
there. I felt like that was a really good spot for him. I know they liked him, but I'm not going to say that I know for sure, but I think when they acquired that first round pick in 2026, I think they ruled out quarterback. I really do. I know
it makes you wonder. I love diving into like alternate timeline, alternate reality scenarios. If the Falcons hadn't have given him that solid, you have to wonder if he's the pick at 90 and they sniped the Seahawks on the Milrow pick right there.
I think he could have been. It's interesting because I could have also seen Shedeur Sanders. I really could have.
Yeah, that would have been
just kind of being like, if you're open-minded to quarterback, which I don't believe the Rams were, they were hoping, from what I heard, they were hoping for Curtis Rourke to fall out of the draft and then sign him, and then the 49ers drafted him, I believe.
Yeah.
That's what they were hoping for. So that kind of, was that before the draft or was that after they got see, we'll never know.
It's so interesting because there's so much shared DNA now in this entire division now. All 4 offensive coordinators, head coaches / play callers are all from the same offensive DNA. And Seahawks met with Curtis Rourke.
Of course they
you say the Rams liked him and the 49ers ultimately take him. Like, he just must have Shanahan passing scheme written all over him. Well, let's finish with this, because for those who don't know, and I hope my viewers appreciate the fact that as much as passionate as you are and as confident as you are in the team you cover, I've always appreciated your ability to give credit where it's due elsewhere and to recognize things that you see in your opponents too. I want to remind people of the first time, I think it was the first time you were ever on my show, but the first time we ever did one of these previews, 2023. Right? We go back 2 years. The Rams are coming off that disaster of a season following their Super Bowl win. They're a 5-win team heading into 2023. Nobody expected them to bounce back as quickly as they did in 2024 and win 10 games. Certainly nobody among the Seahawks fan base. And yet you said on this show that you expected the Rams to win 10 games that year and for the Seahawks to win 9. And man, we took some heat in the comments on that video.
I remember.
And what happened? The Rams go 10-7. Was that the first 17 game season? And the Seahawks go 9-8. So you nailed it. How do you feel this year about where you see the Rams finishing? And again, I'm on record as saying best roster in the division. To me, they're the hands down favorite. Where do you see them finishing? Where do you see the Seahawks finishing? And then just the rest of the division shaking out and what should be a fun 4-team race in some.
I think this is the best division it might be the best division in sports right now.
I was pissed when the Hard Knocks decided to go NFC.
I don't know if I was pissed because I've heard just from people that were on that, it's very overwhelming and it can be distracting. So I'm like, I don't want any distractions with this team.
Seattle's never wanted to be on Hard Knocks.
Yeah. I mean, the Rams were on Hard Knocks and All or Nothing. So I think they're kind of just, they're Hard Knocks, All or Nothing out.
Right.
But yeah, I think, that's tough. Like, I don't know, what is it in baseball? The NL West is probably the toughest division right now. So, well, I mean, the Rockies are terrible, but aside from that, right, there's is a 4-team race. But I would really say the NFC West might be the toughest division in the sport and in all of sports. This year, I have all 4 teams being above 500, all of them. And I had Seattle as the 3rd team in the division going 10-7. Okay. And part of me wanted to give them 11-6. My thing with this division is this. I think the Rams are clearly the best team in the division. They've proven the most. I trust their coach the most. They have the best quarterback. I just think there's so much momentum riding into this year, and I love what they had the offseason. The 49ers, I didn't like their offseason at all, but they do have a coach that's been to Super Bowls. They do have a good quarterback. They do have talent. And I really like that they brought in Robert Saleh. That's honestly my favorite acquisition of the whole year for them. I don't love it. I love it as a football fan. I don't love it as a Rams fan. Then you look at Seattle, and I feel like they had a really good offseason. And I know some people will be like, well, they traded away DK Metcalf. Like, I don't know how that's really good. It's like, to be honest with you, DK Metcalf, after a while, has to be a pain in the ass to have him on the roster. He just does. Like, he immediately spoke to me as a guy that he is going to be such a pain to deal with if you don't sign him immediately. Like, and you see those guys, and it is the wide receiver position normally. I think Seattle did right by him, sending him to a contender. I think Seattle did right by themselves, getting a decent return for him. Because keep in mind, I think everyone's like, DK Metcalf should have brought in a first-round pick, right? But here's the problem. Yes, if you're just trading DK Metcalf, you absolutely should get a first-round pick. But you're trading DK Metcalf with the assumption that the team that gets him is also going to have to pay him. Yep. And I feel like people always leave that because that's not Madden, right? We don't think about that. When we're playing Madden, you just trade guys for first-round picks. Doesn't work that way. I didn't love moving on from Geno, as I mentioned earlier, and going with Sam Darnold, but I don't hate Sam Darnold. I don't think it's a bad move. I think it kind of keeps them where they are. I would just lean more towards Geno. You know, they're probably 11-6 if they keep Geno. I think he wins one more game that maybe they lose with Darnold late. But aside from that, I really like McDonald. I think he is really good at what he does. And then, you know, I like what they did in the draft. I like picking up Cooper Kupp. I think is going to be beneficial. I like the running back room. The offensive line was addressed finally. So I think that was kind of the big thing. But you know, and I think a really underrated thing about Seattle was going out and getting Lawrence, because there are a lot of people that forget DeMarcus Lawrence was one of the better players in football, has dealt with some injuries, but he can have a role on this team, and he can also be kind of like that. You look at what Cooper Kupp is on the offensive side, he can be that on the defensive side. He's been there, he's done that, he can be a leader. I think he's going to be huge for them. And I mean, you know, they got the Ernest Jones deal done. I wasn't sure if they were going to do that. I think that really helps. They have one of the better linebacker groups in this division. So, you know, I think that's a big deal. And then their secondary is really good. So I really like what Seattle did. I think they had probably the most transformative offseason. And then Arizona, to me, they fall below Seattle because I have Seattle at 10-7. I actually have the Rams at 13-4. I have the 49ers at 11-6, I believe. And I had the Cardinals at 9-8. The Cardinals, to me, left a lot of meat on the bone. They had a lot of cap space, and I don't feel like they got a ton better. Because I already thought the Cardinals were solid. And solid to now they're, you know, maybe a little bit better than solid, gets them 9-8. But the issue with the Cardinals is that unless Kyler Murray takes a massive leap forward, they didn't do that much. They went out and they got a closer, which I was hoping they would do as a football fan, going out and getting Josh Sweat. They didn't have a guy that could really close games. They didn't have a guy like off the edge that could really threaten. Then they go out and they get Akeem Davis-Gaither. I thought that was an interesting move. I think he was underutilized in Cincinnati, so I like the fit. Will Johnson is being blasphemy, like overrated. Like, I think he's a good player. I do. But they didn't get some steal. This guy has genuine health concerns, and that is why he fell into the second round. They picked him where he should have gone.
Health and speed.
So, and speed, yeah. And I don't really like his tackling. I don't. I think he's an ankle biter. And when I went and I dove into the film, I thought this was going to be a guy that was more of like a form tackler, a wrap tackler. I didn't really see that out of him. So I was a little bummed by that. But with the Cardinals, I just felt like they left so much. The wide receiver room didn't get any better, in my opinion. They could have made that drastically better. They could have gone out and gotten a serious weapon. I like them, but I don't love them. Like, I feel like Seattle tried to transform and actually get better this year. And I feel like the Cardinals were kind of fine being who they are, and then just, we'll get some bits and pieces and kind of sprinkle them in. And I think, like I said, I think they left a lot of meat on the bone, and I think they're a year away from being a year away. And, I think the big thing with that is that you can say, oh, well, they'll be good in the future. You see how quickly, like 1 year, one contract year on all of these rookie deals, you're wasting that year. So that's why I'm so hard on the Cardinals, because I just felt like they could have done more. The Calais Campbell pickup was great, not just because he's a fan favorite and was drafted there and all of that, but I think he's also one of the better run defenders in the league, to the surprise of many. He still is kicking. Yeah. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, I just felt like they could have found other ways to get a lot better, and they had so much cap to work with.
Yeah.
And they were just kind of like,
I'm on the same page with you. Like, I've never been like, I don't like the quarterback. And so I think that caps their ceiling. I really do. I just think
like Kyler. He is what he is.
I just don't think he has that other step left in him that you mentioned. But I felt the same way about their offseason. I was concerned going into the offseason because of the cap space. And I thought,
they could have been really dangerous.
Maybe they have enough going for them that they'll be able to attract some free agents. And then while there are some guys in their draft class that I liked, I thought it was a very volatile draft class. Like, they didn't.
I agree.
They drafted for. I know I just said earlier in the show I bank on upside all the time, but if your entire class is built on upside, and the floor is potentially low, then that's tricky. I felt like
I hated their first round pick.
I felt like they did what they needed to do. Yeah, he had red flags all over the place for me.
Yeah, I just
felt like they did some things they needed to do, but I think you worded it perfectly. They could have done more, and if they had done a little bit more, I'd be a little more concerned. But again, I think their ascension is capped by the quarterback. I always appreciate your perspective, Jake. Thanks for sharing it with me. I hope my viewers appreciate your view of things. And again, I'm on record as saying I think they're the best team in the league. They're the team everyone's got to be gunning for. First 6 games are going to be key when you look at the schedule. I mean, all the NFC West teams get a break this year because of their 2 rotational. They get to play the South in both the NFC and the AFC, and so we all benefit from that. But those first 6 games, like opening with the Houston Texans, is no joke. I liked their offseason in a lot of ways. And then you get the Eagles at Philly in week 3, Niners in week 5, Ravens in week 6. We're going to know a whole lot about the Rams by the time we get to week 7 when they travel to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jake Ellenbogen, thank you so much. Appreciate what you do, respect what you do, and thanks for coming on the show.
Likewise, Dan. Respect what you're doing. Keep it up. Appreciate your audience. Even if they hate my guts, I appreciate them. Thanks for having me, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Really appreciate the view, the listen. If you are listening on audio, be sure to follow or subscribe depending on which platform you use. And if you really like what I do, leave a rating or a review. That really helps the channel as well. I am working on a technical issue, by the way, when it comes to Apple Podcasts. You may notice that there are 2 duplicate versions of the show available. So if you're going to leave a review, please do me this favor. One of them has reviews, a long review history. The other one has none. And so that's how you'll know you're on the right one. If you want to leave a review, be sure to choose the show that does have reviews that show down at the bottom. Most of them 5-star. Thank you very much. I'm working with the folks at Apple to try and archive the other one. It was just a technical glitch that happened a couple months ago and trying to switch it over to a new website. In the meantime, I'll be continuing this series over the next couple of days. Walter Mitchell, who covers the Arizona Cardinals, will be joining me tomorrow. And then Rob Stats Guerrera from the Gold Standard Network. We'll be talking 49ers. That episode will post on Wednesday. Best way to know when there's new material is hit that bell button, but just subscribe to the channel and then you won't ever be left out. Follow me on Twitter, also at Seahawks Forever. Until next time. Forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys.